Hello and welcome to this Monday's weekly market briefing. We've got lots to talk about, but firstly, Israel says it has destroyed Hamas as a fighting force in the north of Gaza, as well as that federal investigators start probe into Boeing around mid-flight blowout. We've got lots to talk about in the charts also, with lots happening on the economic calendar, with another article to talk about also on global shipping and their fleets. But first article to talk about, of course, is Israel. Now, the IDF has claimed to have destroyed Hamas as a fighting force in the north of Gaza, and this comes as they shift their focus to the centre and south of Gaza in a new stage of war. Now, we've been covering this conflict between Israel and Hamas since the very start of the war. It's been, one with great controversy, and great humanitarian impact. Of course, starting on October the 7th with Hamas's attack into Israel, where over 1,000 civilians were massacred and over 200 civilians taken hostage, along with IDF soldiers also being killed and taken hostage. From that point, we have seen a ground, air and sea operation take place into the Gaza Strip, where we have seen airstrikes take out infrastructure, as well as now ground operations that we're seeing into Gaza take place. And it does seem now that the IDF has established control over the north of Gaza, and this obviously comes during a time of heightened escalations within the Middle East. Now, since October the 7th, we've had Hezbollah, a Shia militia group backed by Iran, based on the Lebanon-Israeli border, also existing in Syria, but engaging in clashes with the IDF and skirmishes at the border. And the worry, of course, was that Hezbollah would invade Israel, dragging yet another power into the mix, as Hezbollah does have a significant amount of control over Lebanon. So the worry was that Lebanon would get pulled into the conflict that way, and Syria as well has a strong relationship with Hezbollah, and we know that Hezbollah has been staging attacks from Israeli territory into Syrian territory, into the Golan Heights, and this is another actor which could then become involved in the conflict. We've also more recently had the Houthis in Yemen staging attacks on commercial vessels sailing through the Red Sea, as well as firing drones and missiles at Israel. And this has caused international condemnation and international action by US, French and the UK's militaries, with condemnation coming from other nations as well, as stated. And as a result, the worry has been whether Yemen as well would now be another actor involved in the conflict, bringing in the US, UK and France, as the US and UK have threatened direct action in Yemen if the Houthis do not cease their action of terrorism against commercial vessels within the Red Sea. So the real question will be, of course, to many of the world leaders in the Arab world at the moment, whether Yemen will continue these attacks, and thus whether the US and UK will get pulled into this conflict, as we do know that a regional escalation, a regional war within the Arab region would have dramatic effects on world markets, and especially the oil market. We know the Arab region is a great producer of oil, especially Saudi Arabia, and there's even been reports and predictions that if this does escalate to a regional conflict, we could see the price of oil skyrocket to $150 a barrel, which would of course have dramatic effects on the international supply chain of oil, and also damage the world's economy and likely cause increased inflation and even recessions for many nations, as this would cut off not only the Red Sea route, which is already being threatened by the Houthis, but it would also cut off that oil supply coming from Saudi Arabia and others within the region, which is why it's so important, of course, to stay on top of this topic and understand the effects that this conflict could have on other nations. Now, it has been 3 months since the October the 7th Hamas attack, which triggered the war. The IDF spokesperson said 12 Hamas battalions in North Gaza were no longer functioning. A reported 8,000 militants have been killed and 30,000 weapons seized by the IDF. As a result, the IDF has started withdrawing reservist battalions from Gaza. This comes in a bid to ease the economic issues coming as a result of mass mobilization. As you know, if we do think back to the start of this ground operation into Gaza, we do remember the mass mobilization which did take place of all reservists of Israel. We did see, those of Israeli citizenship traveling back to Israel from abroad to serve in the military as a result of being a reservist, which many of the men are within Israel, and as a result they have that kind of legal obligation to essentially serve in the military in these times. And as a result, we did see many what would be civilians within Israel then go into this process of war and get out, move themselves out their usual civilian life, where they would be likely more economically productive. And it does seem that we are seeing that economic effect now within Israel. And of course, the Israeli government not only would be worrying about their own economy deteriorating, but also the kind of civilian impact that this does have, withdrawing so many individuals from their usual economic activity and putting them in a military war zone. And so this of course is something that's needing to be solved, and it does seem the IDF is now implementing that through kind of withdrawing certain reservist battalions from Gaza. This comes in that bid to ease the economic issues. Now, heavy airstrikes and ground operations continue in southern Gaza, however. A new buffer zone is starting to be instituted inside Gaza as part of new border defences. All the while, tensions still mount on the Israeli-Lebanon border, where Hezbollah sits, with Hezbollah launching around 60 rockets into Israel on Saturday, with more being expected, as this does come following 2 Israeli airstrikes into Lebanon, killing not only a Hamas commander-in-chief, not commander-in-chief, but I know a high military leader within Hamas, and also killing a person of similar rank within Hezbollah. And we have heard Hezbollah respond to this airstrike, calling for great retaliation. So that's the risk that Israel is now dealing with. It is that whether Hezbollah does now invade or send more rockets into Israel. Now, Antony Blinken is visiting Jordan and Qatar in his latest trip to the region, this time aimed at reducing tensions and preventing the Gaza war from becoming a regional war, with Israel saying they will pursue the removal of Hezbollah from the northern border, which will of course massively increase the risk of regional conflict, as you're just bringing in more actors in the region. So this is something very important to stay on top of. Keep your eyes on it. Next to talk about though is Boeing and federal investigators. Now, federal investigators have launched a probe into Boeing 737 MAX blowout recently, and this comes as airlines in Turkey and Panama ground their flights for inspection. Now, we haven't spoken about Boeing much before, or if ever, but of course, staying on top of these kind of industry-specific issues, or kind of company-specific issues, is always important to keep note of. An issue with Boeing, could spread across the entire airline industry, and these small issues could definitely blow up into larger ones. As well as that, Boeing is a very large stock, of course, a well-known airline company, and therefore keeping your eyes on these sort of issues in relation to airlines is so important indeed. Now, the Federal Aviation Administration ordered the temporary grounding of some 737 MAX 9s in US territory. Despite the incident, the 171 passengers and crew of the plane landed safely in Portland, Oregon. Now, the incident took place only 10 minutes into the flight at about 16,000 feet in the air, so not cruising altitude. Luckily, nobody was seated in the 2 seats next to the cabin door that blew out. Now, the blowout left a gaping hole in the fuselage of the plane, which is often used as an exit. Investigators are now looking at maintenance records, the pressurization system, and more, with the probe being focused on Alaska Airlines rather than Boeing's MAX fleet. But obviously, if this does now move into one which is more so focused on Boeing, we could see dramatic effects on Boeing stocks, as we do know that Boeing has been dealing with a great deal of issues recently. So this would be another one to add to the pile, and a great one indeed. But with the aircraft only being 2 months old, investigators would look at great detail at the assembly records and quality assurance inspections that come a part of the plane. Now, this is another blow to Boeing, which has struggled with manufacturing defects on the 737. The plane ground has led to operators cancelling, of course, large numbers of flights. So this is a very important one to keep your eyes on in relation to the airline industry, and will likely be affecting Boeing stock going into this week, most definitely. Keep your eyes on it. Next to talk about, though, and finally on the articles, is global shipping. Now, if it will load up, the global shipping fleet has reached its oldest average age in almost 15 years. And this comes despite growing pressure on ship owners to order newer, greener vessels. Now, of course, we've been talking a lot about the kind of decarbonisation efforts the world has been moving towards, and the kind of green policies which many Western nations especially have been trying to implement. Now, of course, we spoke about the COP28 conference, I believe, based in Dubai, but this is an important kind of topic to keep your eyes on, as global shipping, of course, is essential to global supply chains, and understanding how different political events are affecting global shipping, and how that affects the economy of the world as a whole is so important indeed, with these new vessels helping decarbonise global trade. Shipbrokers, however, have said the industry is hesitating to order new vessels that run on greener fuels over uncertainty on the availability of these energy resources. Meanwhile, ship owners have cashed in on surging demand for second-hand ships from operators of a shadow fleet transporting Russian oil that is the subject of sanctions. Now, the average age of the global shipping fleet hit 13.7 years in December, which is the oldest since 2009. The Ukraine war has also indirectly driven up the cost of shipping oil, as Europe buys up its oil imports from more distant producers than Russia, and tanker owners are paid more to travel longer distances. Now, shipping fleets are aging despite pressure from regulators and customers to decarbonise. So, this is interesting to note for two reasons, of course, the kind of ship owners and global shipping related issues, but also understanding more about the kind of green efforts which many companies and the world is trying to pursue. So definitely keep your eyes on things in relation to global shipping, as fleets do grow older. Now, that's all to talk about in the articles. Next to talk about, of course, is the charts, where we do have quite a bit happening. Now, firstly, on the US 30, we are seeing a great deal of consolidation. Now, last week we did end off, commenting on how the NFP figure that we were to receive on Friday would greatly affect the charts, and especially the US 30. But it does seem that despite US job openings but the number of those kind of being added to payroll increasing, the US 30 has seen no change. But that can't be said for certain other assets, which we will talk about in a moment. But what will be interesting to see going into this week is whether we do then return back down to this kind of 3820 Fibonacci zone that we have noted before. If we were to draw out a more recent Fibonacci kind of tool, it does seem that price is sitting on the 6180, but it'll be interesting to see whether we do make that reach back down to that 3820, as we're just not finding that momentum that's needed for price to move higher just yet. Next to talk about is dollar, which, coming off the back of last week's NFP, did see a great deal of volatility, kind of moving between these two key levels, but actually for a split second, moving above this key liquidity zone. Now, last week on Friday, of course, as I did previously mention, the NFP figure did show that more people were added to payroll than previously expected. This, of course, hints to a more inflationary pressure in relation to the US economy, and so signals possibly more hawkish action from the Fed, as the Fed might, try and keep interest rates higher for longer to make sure those inflationary pressures are, subdued. But what will be interesting to see going into this week is whether we do see this sell-off as a result of that NFP figure. On the RSI, we are seeing that bearish divergence, so this is another confirmation that price could move to the downside. That said, markets did fail to move to the downside last week, and we only really saw volatility. So how much bearish pressure really is there? I'm not sure. That's all to talk about on the dollar, though. Next to talk about is Euro USD, which has been, it is, kind of greatly affected by NFP as it is paired with the dollar. But as a result of that NFP figure, we did just see price range around and see a great deal of volatility. But if it does seem that, we will see dollar strength, no, not dollar strength, sorry. I meant continuation to the upside, sorry, as a result of, more hawkish perceptions on the economy, in relation to the dollar. But, moving on to euro dollar, if we do see that kind of more hawkish perspective from the Fed as a result of, the NFP figure, we could see a move to the downside for Euro USD. Which levels could it stop off at? We do have these key liquidity zones still marked out, so it'll be interesting to see whether we do stop off there going into this week. Next to talk about, though, is pound yen, which has now moved into a very interesting position, reaching a kind of triple top level. Now, this is kind of the top of the range that we have seen since that kind of great deal of volatility which followed the Bank of Japan hinting towards possibly raising rates, and we have seen this kind of top of the market be formed, where there is a great deal of resistance and liquidity, and a great deal of support and liquidity at the bottom of the range, and price has been moving around in there. We have now reached it for the third time. What will be interesting to see is whether we do have enough bullish momentum to just simply break through, but it does seem that we have found some bearish momentum there, which may allow price to kind of retrace a bit before we do see a continuation to the upside. If we do mark out the Fibonacci retracement tool, there are some key levels which we could see price return to before we see a move higher, with the 50% lining up with that key liquidity zone. So keep your eyes on pound yen. Next to talk about, though, is Bitcoin, which is currently sitting at the kind of bearish Fibonacci retracement level of the 6180, as well as sitting at that liquidity zone. That said, we do see a great deal of Bitcoin volatility, and it'll be interesting to see how other markets move and how that might affect the Bitcoin, as last week's NFP figure could cause now a sell-off for Bitcoin, as a result of more people kind of moving their money back into the dollar, as they do expect more hawkish policy. But it will be interesting to see then whether we do see this sell-off from this key bearish level. Keep your eyes on that. Next to talk about, though, is gold, which as a result of that NFP figure just saw great volatility and spiked to the upside and spiked to the downside. Overall, it did not move much since Thursday of last week. So despite the NFP figure, markets just kind of ranged quickly, great deal of volatility as markets cleared, but we haven't seen a significant move to the downside or upside just yet. But if we do see that dollar strength, we will be expecting that sell to the downside, despite the kind of long-term Fibonacci level that was hit last week, which did signal, bullish momentum for gold. Next to, lastly to talk about is oil. Which is in a very interesting level, as it is once again sitting at this key liquidity zone, which we have now seen price sell off from twice. Will it sell off for a third time? It'll be interesting to see, but we are kind of forming this counter trend line on oil at the moment, so it's hard to kind of tell where price may now move. Keep your eyes on oil though, most definitely. That's all to talk about on the charts though. Lastly to talk about, of course, is the economic calendar, where we do not have that much data coming out this week, but some important data most definitely to note. Now, firstly, we will be getting Canadian balance of trade figure, so important that is very important. Chinese new yuan loans as well, along with that we're getting US inflation figures, including the core inflation figure and just the normal inflation figure. We're forecasting a move to the downside, a lower inflation figure, core inflation figure for the US, but a higher inflation figure for the US, without which of course includes energy and food prices. So keep your eyes on this. As well as that, we're getting Chinese inflation rate figure, along with the UK's British GDP figure, as well as US producer price inflation figure. So lots of data coming out this week. Important data, more quality over quantity, I guess, economic data wise. But that's all from us at Wildwood Capital. We've covered lots on the articles, lots on the charts, and lots on the economic calendar. Hope you have a great trading week and a great Monday. That's all from us. Have a great one. See you later. Bye.